The night in Bakhmut was a canvas of ash and shadow, the air thick with the scent of burnt earth and the distant rumble of artillery. A single candle flickered in a shattered apartment, its flame trembling as if it knew the war outside. Inside, Mikhailo knelt on the cracked floor, his uniform stained with mud, his hands steady as he slipped a simple silver ring onto Olena's finger. Her dress, a pale blue borrowed from a neighbor, caught the candlelight, a fragile glow against the chaos beyond the walls. Their eyes met his weary but resolute, hers bright with a love that defied the war's weight. The room was silent, save for the soft vows they whispered, each word a rebellion against the shell fire that shook the city. Outside, the battle for Bakhmut raged its relentless howl, a reminder that this moment, this fragile union, was stolen from the jaws of war. Mikhailo's hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what they were doing. A wedding in Bakhmut in July 2023 was not just a promise. It was an act of defiance, a spark of hope in a city reduced to rubble. The apartment's walls were scarred windows boarded with splintered wood, yet here they stood, two soldiers carving out a moment of light. Olena's smile was a beacon, her voice steady as she spoke her vows, her medic's patch catching the dim glow. Mikhailo, a junior sergeant in the 93rd Brigade, felt the war's pulse in his chest, but her hand in his grounded him, pulling him back from the trenches he'd left hours ago. The candle flickered as a distant explosion rattled the floor. Mikhailo's instincts flared. He scanned the room, his rifle propped against the wall, his mind mapping escape routes. Olena squeezed his hand, her touch a reminder to stay here in this moment. The officiant, a local priest who'd stayed despite the shelling, spoke softly, his voice weaving through the chaos outside. A handful of friends, fellow soldiers, stood in the shadows, their faces a mix of exhaustion and joy. One held a battered guitar, its strings humming a quiet melody, a folk song that spoke of home, of fields far from this broken city. But the night was not kind. A sharp crack split the air, a rocket too close, its impact shaking dust from the ceiling. The candle fell, its flame snuffed out, plunging the room into darkness. Mikhailo pulled Olena close, shielding her, his heart racing as the others dropped to the floor. The war had found them even here in their stolen moment of peace. The priest paused, then continued, his voice unwavering as if faith could hold the walls together. Mikhailo's mind flashed to the trenches, to the orders that had brought him to Bakhmut, to the love that had kept him alive. This wedding, this vow, was their stand against the chaos, a promise that life could endure. The moment stretched taut as a wire. The shelling paused, the silence heavier than the noise. Olena's hand found Mikhailo's again, her fingers lacing through his, her breath steady. The priest finished pronouncing them bound, and the room exhaled. A soldier lit another candle, its glow returning softer but unbroken. Mikhailo kissed Olena, her lips warm against the cold, and for a heartbeat Bakhmut's ruins faded. They were not soldiers now, but a man and a woman claiming a future the war could not steal. How did they come to this moment, this fragile ceremony, in a city under siege? To understand, we must go back to the days before the wedding, to the trenches and the letters, to the love that grew amidst the ashes of Bakhmut. Context: military geography, politics. Bakhmut in July 2023 was a city transformed into a labyrinth of ruin, its streets a testament to the war's relentless hunger. Once a thriving hub in Ukraine's Donetsk region, known for its salt mines and vibrant markets, Bakhmut had become a crucible of conflict, its buildings reduced to skeletal frames, their facades pocked with scars from artillery. The city sat in a shallow valley surrounded by rolling fields that stretched toward the horizon, now crisscrossed with trenches and littered with the debris of war-twisted metal-charred vehicles and the ghosts of homes. The Siversky Donets River, a winding thread to the north, was a lifeline for supplies, but also a barrier, its bridges contested and often destroyed. Bakhmut's position made it a focal point, a place where both sides poured resources, turning its streets into a chessboard of strategy and sacrifice. The war had entered its second year, and Bakhmut was a symbol of endurance. Ukrainian forces, including Mikhailo's 93rd Brigade, held key positions in the city's western and southern sectors, their lines fortified with sandbags and concrete. Across the front, opposing forces maintained a grip on the eastern edges, their positions marked by the constant rumble of mortars and the hum of drones overhead. The fighting was intense, a grinding struggle for every street, every building. Small units moved through the ruins, relying on speed and cunning to hold ground or reclaim it. The air was thick with dust, the ground churned into mud by summer rains, making every step a battle against the earth itself. The weather was a mercurial ally. July brought heat that shimmered off the broken asphalt, but nights were cooler with sudden storms that turned the streets into rivers of mud. The sky was often overcast, heavy with clouds that seemed to mirror the city's mood. Rain made trenches slick and dangerous, but it also grounded drones, offering brief windows of cover. The wind carried the acrid scent of smoke and gunpowder, a constant reminder of the war's proximity. For soldiers like Mikhailo and Olena, the weather was both a challenge and a shield, shaping their movements as much as the orders they followed. Beyond Bakhmut, the world watched with a mix of horror and resolve. International aid flowed into Ukraine, medical supplies, food equipment, but the conflict's complexity dominated headlines. Sanctions, diplomatic talks, and shifting alliances formed a distant backdrop, their impact felt in the trickle of supplies reaching the front. Stories of resilience like weddings in war zones captured global attention, brief sparks of humanity amid the chaos. Humanitarian groups worked tirelessly to evacuate civilians, but many, like the priest who would marry Mikhailo and Olena, chose to stay anchoring communities torn apart by shelling. The war's toll was measured not just in territory, but in lives disrupted, families separated, and moments stolen. Mikhailo's brigade was stretched thin, their days a blur of patrols, resupply missions, and holding defensive lines. His unit, a mix of veterans and new recruits, operated from a network of safe houses, shattered apartments and basements reinforced against shelling. Olena, a medic attached to a nearby field hospital, navigated the same ruins, her team tending to the wounded under constant threat. Their paths had crossed months earlier in a moment of quiet amidst the storm, and their love had grown in stolen glances and letters passed through runners. Their decision to marry was not just personal, but a symbol, a vow that life could persist, even in Bakhmut's ashes. The city's geography shaped their story. Bakhmut's urban sprawl, now a maze of rubble, offered cover but also danger. Every corner could hide a sniper, every open space a target for artillery. The apartment where they planned their wedding was a rare refuge, its walls standing defiant despite the cracks. The couple had chosen it not for safety, but for its view of the city's last intact park, where a single oak tree stood, its branches scorched but unbroken. It was a place of memory where Mikhailo and Olena had first spoken of a future beyond the war, their hands brushing as they shared a ration under its shade. The military situation was fluid, unpredictable. Both sides used drones for surveillance, their red lights a constant menace in the night sky. Communication lines were fragile, often disrupted by jamming or shelling, forcing reliance on runners or coded signals. Mikhailo's unit was tasked with holding a key intersection, a choke point for supplies, while Olena's hospital operated under blackout conditions to avoid detection. Their wedding, planned in secret, was a logistical feat, coordinating leave, securing a priest, gathering a handful of friends, all while the city trembled under fire. The global context added weight to their choice. The war had drawn attention to Ukraine's spirit, its people's refusal to yield. Stories of weddings, births, and acts of kindness in war zones became beacons shared by journalists and amplified by those seeking hope. Mikhailo and Olena knew their wedding would be more than a private moment. It was a message, a quiet defiance that love could endure where destruction reigned. They planned it with care, not for fame, but for themselves, for the team that stood by them, for the city that refused to break. As they prepared, the war's rhythm dictated their lives. Mikhailo's nights were spent in trenches, his eyes scanning the dark for movement. Olena's days were filled with the wounded, her hand steady as she stitched wounds in flickering light. Their love was a thread woven through these moments, letters tucked into pockets, a shared glance during a resupply run, a promise whispered in a basement. The wedding was their anchor, a moment to claim amidst the chaos, a vow that Bakhmut's ruins could not bury their hope. The stage was set, a city under siege, a couple bound by love, a war that tested every choice. The apartment waited, its candle ready to burn its walls, a fragile shield against the night. Mikhailo and Olena stood on the edge of their moment, their hearts beating in time with the city's pulse, ready to say yes to a future the war could not steal. Backstory and inner world. Mikhailo stood in the dim light of a Bakhmut basement, his uniform worn but neatly pressed, a rare moment of care in a city that offered none. At 29, he was a junior sergeant in the 93rd Brigade, his broad shoulders carrying the weight of months in the trenches. Born in a small village near Cherkasy, Mikhailo had grown up tending his family's orchard, his hands more accustomed to pruning apple trees than gripping a rifle. His life before the war was filled with the rhythm of seasons, the laughter of his younger sisters, and dreams of studying engineering in Kyiv. When the war came in 2022, he enlisted, driven not by anger, but by a quiet duty to protect the land that had raised him. His inner world was a tapestry of resolve and longing, fear of losing those he loved, hope for a future where orchards bloomed again, and a stubborn belief that even in war life could endure. Tucked inside his vest was a letter from Olena, its words worn from countless readings, a reminder of why he fought. Olena, 27, stood nearby, her medic's kit slung over her shoulder, her dark hair pulled back in a practical braid. Raised in Lviv, she had trained as a nurse, her days once filled with the bustle of a city hospital. Her family's warmth, her mother's cooking, her father's stories of Ukraine's history had shaped her, giving her a quiet strength that shone in her steady hands. When the war began, she volunteered for the front, her skills needed in places like Bakhmut's field hospitals. Olena's heart was a storm of empathy and fear. She feared not for herself, but for those she couldn't save, their faces haunting her dreams. Her hope was simpler: to see Mikhailo smile again, to build a life beyond the ruins. She carried a small pendant, a gift from her grandmother, its weight a tether to home. Their love had sparked in Bakhmut's chaos during a rare moment of calm in a ruined cafe. Mikhailo had shared a ration Olena, a story, their laughter a fleeting rebellion against the war. Letters followed, passed through runners, each word a bridge between their worlds. Their decision to marry was born in a trench under a sky lit by flares, when Mikhailo had whispered his promise to her, his voice steady despite the shelling. Olena's acceptance was a vow of her own, a belief that love could outlast the war's hunger. Beside them stood Dmitro, a wiry soldier from Kharkiv, Mikhailo's closest friend in the brigade. At 32, Dmitro was a former mechanic, his hands scarred from years in a garage. His humor, sharp and unrelenting, was a shield against the war's weight, but his eyes carried the loss of his hometown shelled early in the conflict. Dmitro's fear was forgetting the man he'd been: a husband, a father to a daughter now safe in Poland. His hope was to see her again, to tell her stories of Bakhmut's resilience. He'd volunteered to play the guitar at the wedding, his fingers coaxing music from battered strings, a gift to his friends. Irina, Olena's fellow medic, was a quiet presence at 25. Raised in Odessa, she had dreamed of painting her sketchbook filled with seascapes before the war claimed it. Now her hands stitched wounds instead of canvases, her calm a balm to the wounded. Irina feared the war's toll on her spirit, the way it dulled her colors. Her hope was to find beauty again in moments like this wedding where love defied the ruins. She'd helped Olena find the blue dress, a small act of care in a city that offered none. Father Petro the priest was a stoic figure at 40, his beard flecked with gray. A Bakhmut native, he had stayed when others fled, his church a refuge for those left behind. His faith was not in words but in actions, blessing soldiers, comforting civilians, burying the lost. His fear was that the war would erase his city's soul. His hope was that moments like this wedding would preserve it. He carried a small Bible, its pages worn a reminder of why he stayed. Together they were a mosaic of ordinary lives bound by extraordinary circumstances. In the basement, as they prepared for the wedding, their silence was heavy with unspoken thoughts. Mikhailo glanced at Olena, seeing not just a soldier, but the woman who'd become his home. Olena met his gaze, her pendant pressed against her heart, a promise of tomorrow. Dmytro tuned his guitar, his jokes hiding the ache for his daughter. Irina adjusted Olena's dress, her fingers lingering on the fabric, a memory of beauty. Father Petro stood ready, his presence a quiet anchor. Their fears were real. Shells could fall, patrols could find them, but so was their hope. The wedding was more than a ceremony. It was a stand, a claim to life in a city that seemed to forbid it. Mikhailo and Olena's love was their defiance, their team's support, their strength. As they stepped toward the apartment where the candle waited, they carried not just their vows, but the weight of Bakhmut's spirit, a city that refused to break. On the way to battle, the streets of Bakhmut were a maze of shadows, their broken pavement glistening under a sudden July rain. Mikhailo led the small group through the ruins, his boots navigating the rubble with practiced care. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and smoke. The distant thud of artillery, a constant pulse in the night. Olena walked beside him, her medic's kit slung low, her steps steady despite the weight of the moment. Behind them, Dmytro carried his battered guitar, its case strapped to his back, a quiet promise of the music to come. Irina followed, her eyes scanning the dark for threats, while Father Petro brought up the rear, his Bible tucked inside his coat, his presence a calm anchor. They moved toward the apartment where the wedding would take place, a fragile sanctuary in a city under siege. The journey was no simple walk. It was a calculated dance through Bakhmut's dangers. The city's western sector, held by Mikhailo's 93rd Brigade, was a patchwork of fortified positions and shattered buildings. The apartment, a half-standing relic on a quiet street, was chosen for its distance from the front line. But no place in Bakhmut was truly safe. Shells could fall without warning, drones patrolled the night sky, and patrols roamed the edges of contested zones. The group moved in silence, their breaths visible in the cool night air, their senses tuned to the war's rhythm. Mikhailo's mind was a storm of focus and memory. He carried Olena's latest letter in his vest, its words a lifeline. "We'll find our moment even here." The thought of her, of their vows, steadied him as he scanned the street for movement. The rain was both ally and foe, masking their footsteps, but turning the ground to mud, slowing their pace. He glanced at Olena, her face half lit by a flicker of moonlight through the clouds. Her pendant gleamed faintly, a reminder of the home they both dreamed of. His fear was not of the shells, but of failing her, of losing this chance to claim a piece of life amidst the chaos. Olena's steps were deliberate, her medic's instincts sharp. She'd navigated Bakhmut's ruins countless times, rushing to the wounded under fire. But this night felt different. The weight of her kit was familiar, but the weight of the moment, her wedding, a vow made in defiance of war, was new. She thought of her parents in Lviv, of their kitchen filled with the scent of borscht, of the life she'd promised to return to. Her fear was that the war would steal more than time. It would steal the softness she fought to keep. Her hope was Mikhailo, his quiet strength, the promise they'd made under that scorched oak tree. Dmytro moved with a lightness that belied his burden. His guitar, a relic from his Kharkiv days, was more than an instrument. It was a piece of his daughter, of the lullabies he'd played for her. He feared she'd forget his voice, his laugh, but tonight he'd play for his friends, for their love. His jokes, usually quick, were absent, now replaced by a quiet hum of a folk song under his breath, a melody to keep the dark at bay. Irina beside him clutched a small bundle. The blue dress for Olena scavenged from a neighbor's abandoned home. Her artist's eye caught the beauty in the ruins, the way rain glistened on broken glass, but her heart feared the war's toll on her spirit. She hoped this wedding would be a spark, a reminder of what endured. Father Petro walked last. His steps measured, his eyes on the group like a shepherd. The war had tested his faith, but moments like this, love in the ashes, renewed it. He feared Bakhmut's soul would be lost to the rubble, but he hoped this wedding would be a seed, a story to carry forward. His Bible heavy in his pocket was a weight he welcomed, a reminder of why he stayed. The group skirted a collapsed market, its stalls reduced to splinters, the air heavy with the memory of life. Mikhailo signaled a pause as a drone's hum cut through the rain, its red light a faint pulse in the sky. They pressed against a wall, its bricks cold and crumbling, their breaths held. The drone passed its sound, fading, and Mikhailo exhaled his hand, brushing Olena's. The moment was fleeting, but it was theirs, a shared pulse in the dark. They moved on, weaving through alleys, avoiding open streets where snipers might wait. The apartment was close now, its outline visible through the rain, a low building, its upper floors gone, but its ground level intact. A sudden flare lit the sky, a magnesium glow that cast long shadows. Mikhailo's heart raced, his training kicking in. He gestured for the group to drop low, their bodies pressed into the mud. The flare was routine, not aimed at them, but it reminded them of Bakhmut's dangers. Olena's hand found his, her touch a quiet anchor. Dmytro clutched his guitar case, his eyes on the sky, while Irina's fingers tightened on the dress, protecting it from the mud. Father Petro whispered a prayer, his voice lost in the rain. The flare faded, and they rose, their resolve unbroken. The apartment came into view, its boarded windows a faint promise of shelter. Mikhailo led them to a side entrance, a narrow door hidden by debris. Inside, the air was damp, but still a contrast to the chaos outside. A single room, its walls scarred but standing, waited for them. A table held a candle unlit, and a few chairs scavenged from the ruins. It was no cathedral, but it was enough a space to claim their moment. Mikhailo's eyes met Olena's, a silent vow that they'd reached their sanctuary, however fragile. The group gathered inside their wet uniforms, dripping onto the cracked floor. Dmytro set down his guitar, his fingers brushing its strings, a soft note breaking the silence. Irina unwrapped the dress, its blue fabric a splash of color in the gray. Father Petro opened his Bible, his hands steady despite the night's weight. Olena's pendant caught the dim light, her hope a quiet fire. Mikhailo felt the letter in his vest, its words a heartbeat. The war waited outside, its sounds muffled but ever-present. But here in this room they were ready to defy it. The journey had been a test, each step a gamble against the night. But they were here together, their fears and hopes woven into this moment. The candle waited to be lit, the vows to be spoken, the music to be played. Bakhmut's ruins surrounded them, but so did their love, their team, their will to endure. Mikhailo took Olena's hand, his heart steady, now ready to step into the light they'd created amidst the ashes. The battle begins. Twist and struggle. The apartment in Bakhmut was a fragile oasis, its walls trembling with the distant pulse of artillery. Mikhailo stood by the boarded window, his silhouette sharp against the flicker of a single candle. Olena, now in the borrowed blue dress, adjusted her pendant, her eyes bright with a mix of nerves and resolve. The room was small, its cracked walls adorned with a few scavenged flowers, their petals wilting but defiant. Dmytro tuned his guitar, its soft notes a quiet rebellion against the war outside. Irina arranged chairs, her movements careful, as if preserving the moment's delicate balance. Father Petro opened his Bible, his voice ready to weave vows through the chaos. The air was heavy with anticipation, the promise of love about to be sealed in a city that seemed to forbid it. The ceremony began with a hush. The group gathered in a tight circle around the candle's glow. Mikhailo took Olena's hand, his calloused fingers gentle, his heart racing with the weight of their choice. Father Petro's words were soft, but steady, a prayer for unity in a world torn apart. Dmytro's guitar hummed a folk melody, its chords weaving through the room a thread of home in Bakhmut's ruins. Olena's smile was a beacon, her eyes locked on Mikhailo's, their shared promise louder than the war's rumble. The moment felt sacred, a bubble of light in the dark, but the war was never far away. The first tremor came as Father Petro spoke of eternity, a low boom closer than the usual artillery shaking dust from the ceiling. Mikhailo's instincts flared, his hand tightening on Olena's. The group froze, their eyes darting to the boarded windows. Dimitro's fingers paused on the guitar, the notes fading into silence. Irina's hand hovered near her medic's kit, her artist's calm replaced by alertness. The sound wasn't a stray shell, it was deliberate, a mortar landing in the street outside. Mikhailo's mind raced, mapping the apartment's exits, the path back to the safe house. The ceremony, so carefully planned, was now a target in Bakhmut's unpredictable night. The twist came swiftly. A sharp crackle broke the silence. Dimitro's radio, tucked in his pack, hissed with a warning from the brigade's lookout. "Patrol 2 blocks east. Moving your way. Possible drone." Mikhailo's heart sank. The apartment chosen for its seclusion was no longer safe. The patrol's presence meant the ceremony had been noticed, perhaps a light leak, a runner's careless step, or a drone's thermal sweep. The team exchanged glances, their faces a mix of fear and resolve. Olena's hand squeezed Mikhailo's, her voice a whisper. "We finish this." Her words were a command, a vow, a refusal to let the war steal their moment. Mikhailo nodded, his training kicking in. He signaled to Dimitro, who slipped to the window, peering through a crack in the boards. The street was dark, but headlights flickered in the distance, their beams cutting through the rain-soaked night. Irina moved to the door, her medic's instincts ready to act if the worst came. Father Petro continued, his voice unwavering, as if faith could hold the walls together. The candle flickered, its flame dancing with each tremor, a mirror of the group's fragile hope. Mikhailo's mind churned, finish the vows or flee now. The patrol was close, the drone a shadow in the sky, its hum a low menace. The struggle intensified. Another mortar landed closer, its impact rattling the floor. The candle fell, its flame snuffed out, plunging the room into darkness. Mikhailo pulled Olena down, shielding her as dust rained from the ceiling. Dimitro cursed softly, his radio crackling with updates. "They're sweeping the block. We've got minutes." Irina relit the candle, her hands steady, despite the chaos, its glow returning like a defiant spark. Father Petro's voice rose faster now, weaving the final vows through the shaking air. Mikhailo and Olena stood, their hands clasped, their eyes locked, determined to finish what they'd started. Mikhailo's decision was a heartbeat born of love and duty. "We stay," he whispered, his voice firm. "We say the vows, then we move." Olena nodded, her pendant catching the candlelight, her resolve a mirror of his. Dimitro slung his guitar aside, grabbing his rifle, his humor replaced by focus. Irina positioned herself by the door, ready to guide them out. Father Petro spoke faster, his words a lifeline, binding Mikhailo and Olena. In a moment the war couldn't break. The patrol's headlights grew brighter, their voices audible, now sharp and searching. The drone's hum circled closer, its red light a predator's eye in the sky. The team's unity held them together. Dimitro signaled a plan, draw the patrol away with a decoy. He'd slip out the back, make noise in the alley, lead them east. It was a risk, a gamble with his life, but his grin was steady. "You get married, I get famous," he whispered, his joke a spark in the dark. Mikhailo hesitated, his heart torn, but Dimitro's nod was firm. "For you two," he said, and slipped into the night, his footsteps fading into the rain. Father Petro finished the vows, pronouncing them husband and wife. Mikhailo kissed Olena, her lips warm against the cold, the moment of victory over the war's chaos. The room exhaled, the candle's glow steady now, but the danger was closer. Dimitro's decoy worked, the patrol's voices shifted east, their headlights turning, but the drone remained, its hum a constant threat. Irina signaled the group to prepare her medic's kit, ready for the wounded they hoped wouldn't come. Olena's dress was streaked with dust, but her smile was unbroken. Her hand in Mikhailo's, a promise kept. They moved to the door, the ceremony complete, but the night unfinished. Dimitro's radio crackled once, a faint clear for now, but his voice was strained, distant. Mikhailo's heart clenched, his friend's fate uncertain. The group stepped into the rain, the apartment's warmth left behind. The street was dark, the patrol distracted, but the drone's light lingered, a reminder that safety was fleeting. Mikhailo led Olena beside him, her dress a flash of blue in the night. Irina and Father Petro followed their steps, quick their eyes on the shadows. The wedding was theirs, a moment carved from Bakhmut's ruins, but the struggle was not over. Dimitro's decoy had bought them time, but the patrol would return. The drone would hunt. Mikhailo's hand tightened on Olena's, their vows a fire in his chest. They moved toward the safe house, the war's pulse around them, their love, a light that refused to fade. The sacrifice. Decision and turning point. The rain-slicked streets of Bakhmut glistened under the faint glow of a retreating flare, its light fading into the night's embrace. Mikhailo led the group through the ruins, his hand clasped tightly around Olena's, her blue dress now streaked with mud, but still a beacon in the dark. The war's pulse throbbed around them, distant artillery, the low hum of a drone circling somewhere above the crunch of their boots on broken glass. Irina followed close, her medic's kit bouncing against her hip, her eyes scanning the shadows for threats. Father Petro brought up the rear, his Bible, a silent weight in his coat, his step steady despite the chaos. The apartment where Mikhailo and Olena had sealed their vows was behind them now, its candles glow, a memory they carried into the night. Dimitro's absence was a wound, his decoy mission a gamble that had bought them time, but left him alone in Bakhmut's maze. His last radio message, clear for now, crackled in Mikhailo's earpiece. Its tone strained a thread of hope, stretched thin. The patrol's voices, once sharp and close, had faded eastward, drawn by Dimitro's diversion. But the drone's hum was relentless, a predator stalking the sky. Mikhailo's heart churned with fear, not for himself, but for his friend, for the man who'd played a folk song to celebrate their love. The wedding was complete, their vows spoken, but the night demanded more, and the cost was rising. The group moved toward the safe house, a basement 2 kilometers west, a haven where the brigade could regroup. The path was treacherous. Open streets exposed them to drones, alleys hid snipers, and the rain turned rubble to sludge. Mikhailo's training kept him focused, his eyes scanning for cover, but his mind was with Dimitro. Olena's hand in his was a lifeline, her presence a reminder of why they pressed on. Her pendant caught a flicker of moonlight, its glint a quiet promise. Irina's breath was steady, her artist's eye noting the ruin's stark beauty even now. Father Petro's prayers were silent, his faith a shield for them all. The turning point came without warning. A sharp crack split the air, a sniper's shot, not from the patrol, but from a rooftop ahead, its echo bouncing off the broken walls. The bullet struck the ground near Irina, kicking up mud, and the group dropped low, their bodies pressed against a crumbled storefront. Mikhailo's heart raced, his rifle raised, his goggles scanning for the glint of a scope. The drone's hum grew louder, its red light cutting through the rain, pinning them in its thermal gaze. The patrol's voices returned closer now, their headlights sweeping the street a block away. Dimitro's diversion had stretched the enemy thin, but not enough. The group was trapped, the safe house still too far. Mikhailo's mind raced, the weight of command falling on him. The sniper pinned them, the drone tracked them, and the patrol was closing in. Olena's eyes met his, her resolve unshaken despite the fear in her tightened grip. Irina whispered, "We can't stay here," her voice calm but urgent, her medic's instincts ready for the worst. Father Petro knelt, his hands clasped, his presence a quiet strength. Mikhailo's thoughts flickered to the vows they'd just spoken, to the life they'd promised each other, to Dimitro's sacrifice still unfolding in the dark. The safe house was their only chance, but reaching it meant crossing an open square, a death trap under the sniper's scope and the drone's eye. The sacrifice came from Irina, her voice low but firm, cut through the rain. "I can draw the sniper. Move fast when I do." Mikhailo's head snapped towards her, his protest immediate. "No, we stay together," but Irina's eyes were steady, her artist's soul burning bright. "You're married now," she said, her voice soft but resolute. "Get Olena out. I'll meet you at the safe house." Before Mikhailo could argue, she slipped her medic's kit to Olena, keeping only a small flashlight. For the wounded, she said, a faint smile breaking through. It was a choice. A gift. A risk she took for them all. Mikhailo's heart tore, but time was merciless. He knotted his throat tight and signaled the group to prepare. Irina moved first, darting across the street, her flashlight flickering in a deliberate pattern to draw the sniper's eye. A shot rang out, missing her, the bullet striking a wall as she vanished into an alley. The drone's light shifted, following her heat signature, its hum a predatory growl. The patrol's voices grew louder, drawn by the shot, but the square was clear for a moment, a window opened by Irina's courage. "Go," Mikhailo whispered, pulling Olena forward. They ran, Father Petro behind them, their steps pounding through the mud. The square was a blur of rain and shadow, the safe house's silhouette barely visible ahead. Olena's dress caught on rubble, tearing, but she didn't slow, her hand locked in Mikhailo's. Father Petro's breath was heavy, his faith carrying him forward. Mikhailo's mind was with Irina, with Dmytro, their sacrifices a weight he'd carry forever. The drone's hum faded slightly, its focus split, but the patrol's headlights were closing in, their shouts sharp in the night. They reached the safe house, a basement beneath a ruined shop, its entrance hidden by debris. Mikhailo pushed open the heavy door, ushering Olena and Father Petro inside. The air was damp, the walls reinforced with sandbags, a faint lantern casting shadows. Olena collapsed against a wall, her breath ragged, but her eyes fierce with love. Father Petro knelt, his Bible open, his prayers now audible, a quiet plea for those still outside. Mikhailo's radio crackled, but no voices came, only static, a void where Dmytro and Irina should have been. Mikhailo's decision had been made, but its cost was unbearable. Irina's diversion had saved them, but her fate was unknown. Dmytro's decoy had bought them the wedding, but his silence was a knife. Mikhailo looked at Olena, her face streaked with mud, her pendant gleaming faintly. Their vows were real, their love a fire that burned through the war's cold, but the team that had made it possible was fractured. He whispered into the radio, "Dmytro, Irina, report." The static answered a silence heavier than the rain. The safe house was a refuge, but not an end. The patrol was still out there, the drone still hunting. Mikhailo's hand found Olena's, their fingers lacing together their wedding, a promise kept against all odds. Father Petro's prayers continued, a thread of hope in the dark. The team's sacrifice. Dmytro's decoy, Irina's run, had been the turning point, a bridge to safety built on courage. Mikhailo's heart ached, but he held Olena close, their love a light that refused to fade, even as the war's shadow loomed. They waited, their breaths held for any sign of their friends. The rain beat against the safe house, the night alive with danger, but inside the memory of their vows lingered a defiant spark in Bakhmut's ashes. Mikhailo's resolve hardened. He would find Dmytro and Irina, or honor their sacrifice by living the life they'd fought for. The war was not done, but neither was their hope. Aftermath. The cost and silence. The basement safe house in Bakhmut was a cocoon of shadows, its walls damp and heavy with the weight of the night. Mikhailo sat against a sandbag, his hand still clasped around Olena's, her blue dress now torn and streaked with mud, a relic of their stolen moment. The lantern's faint glow cast their faces in soft relief, Olena's eyes bright with resolve, Mikhailo's etched with worry. Father Petro knelt in a corner, his Bible open, his whispered prayers a quiet rhythm against the rain's patter outside. The war's distant rumble seeped through the walls, a reminder that their sanctuary was temporary, that Bakhmut's chaos waited just beyond the door. The wedding was over, the vows sealed, but the cost of that moment hung in the air, heavy as the smoke that clung to the city. The silence on the radio was a wound that wouldn't close. Dmytro and Irina, who had risked everything to ensure the ceremony's success, were still out there, their fates unknown. Mikhailo's last call. Dmytro-Irina report had met only static, a void that echoed in his chest. Olena's pendant gleamed faintly, her hand tightening on his, a silent promise that they'd face this together. The safe house was safe for now, the patrol's headlights no longer sweeping the street. The drone's hum faded into the rain. But safety was fragile. a breath held against the war's next move. Mikhailo's mind replayed the night, the candlelit vows, Dimitro's guitar, Irina's flashlight flickering in the dark. Dimitro had slipped into the alleys, his decoy drawing the patrol east, giving them time to finish the ceremony. Irina had run across the square, her light a beacon to pull the sniper's gaze, opening a path to the safe house. Their sacrifices had made the wedding possible, a moment of love carved from Bakhmut's ruins. But now, as the rain beat against the safe house, Mikhailo felt the weight of their absence, a debt he could never repay. Olena leaned against him, her breath steady despite the night's toll. Her dress, once a symbol of hope, was now a map of their escape, torn at the hem, stained with the city's mud. She touched her pendant, a gift from her grandmother, and whispered, "They'll make it back." Her words were a wish as much as a belief, a spark of hope in the dark. Mikhailo wanted to believe her, to trust that Dimitro's humor and Irina's resilience would carry them through. But the silence on the radio was relentless, a reminder that war offered no guarantees. Father Petro rose, his Bible, closed his eyes, heavy but kind. He placed a hand on Mikhailo's shoulder, his voice soft. "You gave them something to fight for," he said, gesturing to Olena. "This night your love, it's a light they carried with them." His words were a comfort, but they couldn't fill the void. Mikhailo knotted his throat tight, his thoughts with his friends. The priest's faith was a thread that bound them, a belief that even in Bakhmut's ashes, something sacred endured. The safe house was a pause, not an end. The brigade's runners would come at dawn, bringing news or orders, but for now the group waited. Olena unpacked her medic's kit, checking supplies, her hands moving with the same care she'd shown in the field hospital. Mikhailo watched her, marveling at her strength, the way she carried hope like a shield. Their vows, spoken in the flicker of a candle, were a promise not just to each other, but to the life they'd build beyond the war. The ring on her finger, simple and silver, was a weight he felt too, a vow to protect, to endure, to return to the orchard in Cherkasy, where they'd walk together someday. The aftermath was not in the war's shifting lines, but in the moments left behind. The apartment's cracked walls holding the echo of Dimitro's guitar. The candle's wax hardened on the floor, a testament to their defiance. The scorched oak tree in the park, where Mikhailo and Olena had first dreamed of this day. These images lingered not as scars, but as markers of what they'd claimed. The war had taken much home's friends' futures, but it hadn't taken this, a love sealed in the heart of Bakhmut, a team that stood together, a city that refused to be silenced. A faint crackle broke the silence, Dimitro's voice weak but alive on the radio. "Safe house east side. I'm with Irina. She's hit but stable." Mikhailo's heart leapt, relief flooding him like the dawn outside. Olena's eyes met his, her smile breaking through the mud and exhaustion. Father Petro exhaled, his prayers answered. Mikhailo grabbed the radio, his voice steady. "Hold position, we're coming." The safe house door opened, the rain softer now, the sky lightening to a pale gray. Mikhailo led the way, Olena beside him, her medic's kit ready. Father Petro followed, his Bible a quiet companion. They found Dimitro and Irina in a ruined shop a kilometer away. Irina sat against a wall, her arm bandaged, her face pale but defiant. The sniper's shot had grazed her, a shallow wound, but she'd kept moving, guiding Dimitro through the alleys. Dimitro's grin was tired but unbroken, his guitar case scuffed but intact. "Couldn't miss the party," he said, his voice rough. Olena knelt beside Irina, her hands quick, checking the wound with care. Mikhailo clasped Dimitro's shoulder, words failing him, gratitude too deep for speech. The team was whole again, battered but alive, their bond forged anew in the night's crucible. The dawn broke over Bakhmut, its light filtering through the ruins, casting long shadows across the mud. The city was still a battlefield, its streets scarred, its people weary. But the wedding, the escape, the reunion, they were a defiance, a spark that refused to die. Mikhailo and Olena stood together, their hands entwined, their rings catching the first rays of sun. Dimitro's guitar rested nearby, its strings silent but ready. Irina's sketchbook tucked in her pack held a new drawing, a ring against a cracked wall, a promise of beauty. Father Petro looked to the sky, his faith unshaken. The war would go on its rhythm unbroken, but this night was theirs. The safe house, the apartment, the oak tree, they were markers of a love that endured, a team that carried each other, a city that held fast. Mikhailo's thoughts turned to Cherkasy, to the orchard where he'd walk with Olena, their future a seed planted in Bakhmut's ashes. The cost was heavy. Dmitro's risk, Irina's wound, the fear that lingered, but so was the gain. A vow kept, a family reunited, a hope that burned brighter than the war's fire. As they prepared to move, runners arrived with orders, new positions, new challenges. Mikhailo and Olena shared a glance, their love a quiet strength. The war was not done, but neither were they. The dawn light spilled over the ruins, a promise that life could endure, even here in the heart of Bakhmut's storm. Message to viewer. The dawn light crept over Bakhmut, painting the ruins in hues of gold and gray, a fragile beauty born from the night's chaos. Mikhailo stood outside the safe house, his hand still entwined with Olena's, the silver ring on her finger catching the first rays of sun. The city's scars were stark in the morning, crumbled buildings, streets choked with rubble, the distant hum of artillery, a reminder that peace was fleeting. Yet in this moment, the air felt lighter, as if Bakhmut itself exhaled after the night's ordeal. The wedding, sealed in a flickering candle's glow, was a spark that lingered, a testament to love's defiance in a place that seemed to forbid it. Dmitro leaned against the safe house door, his guitar case at his feet, his grin weary but unbroken. Irina sat nearby, her bandaged arm a badge of her courage, her sketchbook open to a new page. Father Petro stood apart. His Bible closed, his eyes on the horizon as if seeing beyond the war's shadow. The night had been a crucible, forging their bond in the heat of danger and hope. Mikhailo's thoughts drifted to the apartment where the candle had burned, where Olena's vows had woven a promise stronger than the war's roar. He felt the weight of her letter in his vest, its words a heartbeat. "We'll find our moment even here." That moment had come carved from Bakhmut's ashes, but it carried a cost. Dmitro's gamble in the alleys, Irina's run through the sniper's gaze, the fear that had gripped them all. They had emerged whole, but the silence of those moments when the radio offered only static lingered like a scar. Olena's pendant gleamed against her torn dress, a symbol of the home she carried within her. She looked at Mikhailo, her smile a quiet fire, her hand steady in his. Their love was not just a vow, but a rebellion, a refusal to let the war define them. She thought of her parents in Lviv, of the kitchen where she'd learned to laugh, of the future she and Mikhailo would build, an orchard in Cherkasy, perhaps where their children would run under apple trees. The war had taken much, but it hadn't taken this, the stubborn will to dream, to love, to hold fast to each other in the face of ruin. Dmitro's guitar rested against the safe house wall, its strings silent but ready. He'd played for their wedding, his music a gift that had carried them through the dark. His thoughts were with his daughter in Poland, her face a beacon that kept him moving forward. His decoy run drawing the patrol away had been for her as much as for Mikhailo and Olena, a promise to be the man she'd remember, the father who brought light to others. Irina, her arm bandaged, sketched in her book, a ring against a cracked wall, a symbol of the night's triumph. Her artist's heart bruised by war found beauty in these moments, in the resilience of love amidst the rubble. Father Petro's gaze lingered on the city, his faith a quiet strength. Bakhmut was his home. Its streets a map of his life, its people his purpose. The wedding had been a seed, a moment of grace that proved the city's soul endured. He thought of the church, its steeple broken, but its doors still open, a refuge for those who stayed. His prayers were not for victory, but for endurance, for the courage to carry on, to find light in the ashes. The safe house was a pause, a breath in the war's relentless rhythm. Runners had brought orders, new positions to hold, new challenges to face, but for now the group stood together, their bond a shield against what lay ahead. Mikhailo looked at his team, his family in this moment, and felt a surge of gratitude. They had risked everything for his and Olena's love for a moment that defied Bakhmut's chaos. The ring on his finger matching Olena's was a weight he welcomed, a promise to live for her, for them, for the future they'd claimed. The aftermath of the night was not in the war's shifting lines, but in the images that lingered, the candle's glow, Dimitro's music, Irina's flashlight in the dark, Father Petro's steady voice. These were not just memories, but anchors, proof that humanity could endure where destruction reigned. Mikhailo imagined the letter he'd write to his sisters in Cherkasy, not of the danger, but of the love that had bloomed in Bakhmut, of the friends who'd carried them through. He'd tell them of the oak tree, scorched but standing, a symbol of what they fought for. The war would continue its tides, pulling at them all, but this night was a beacon. It was a story of ordinary people, soldiers, medics, priests, made extraordinary by their choices, by their refusal to let the war steal their hope. Mikhailo and Olena's wedding was more than a ceremony. It was a stand, a claim to life in a city that seemed to forbid it. Dimitro's music, Irina's courage, Father Petro's faith, they were threads in a tapestry of resilience woven in the heart of Bakhmut's ruins. What does it mean to love in a time of war? To choose hope when the world trembles, to hold fast to each other when the night offers only danger. These are questions that linger not just for Mikhailo and Olena, but for all who hear their story. The war in Ukraine, like all wars, is a crucible, testing the human spirit, revealing its strength in the smallest moments, a vow spoken, a song played, a hand extended in the dark. It asks us to look at those caught in its shadow, soldiers, families, communities, and to see ourselves. What would we risk for love? What light would we carry? This story, inspired by the courage of those who found love amidst Bakhmut's chaos, is a call to reflect. It's a reminder that even in war's darkest hours, humanity endures in the vows that bind, the music that lifts, the hope that refuses to break. Share your thoughts below. What does love mean in the face of hardship? How do we hold on to hope when all seems lost? Subscribe to Ukraine Frontline War Stories for more untold tales of resilience and humanity. Stories that remind us why we hold fast, not to war, but to each other.